I think probably nationally one of the best school-based, school-driven, school-owned MTSS models that's been around longest is the comprehensive behavioral health model from Boston Public Schools. Boston's been doing this well over 10 years. They have a very smart director, Andrea Amador, who is very savvy. She's very intelligent. She's very active in NASP. She's a former school psychologist. She supports very heavily what school psychologists could be doing if they weren't doing whisks and wyats. And the outcomes that we've seen her generate are awesome. Annual report from 2018 and 19, Boston Public Schools is doing this model in 71 schools, serving over 31,000 kids. And these schools aren't like, suburban schools. 74% high needs kids, 55%, low SES, and so forth. 45% first language other than English. They do a multi-tier model, and it's very, very similar to a lot of MTSS. What they emphasize is instruction, assessment, and database decision making. They use PBIS as a tier 1 foundation, and then they implement SEL instruction on top of that. And they've used the BIMAS for around 10 years to evaluate their work, to improve their work. They're also pretty savvy about implementation, so they take cohorts of schools every 2 years, and they really emphasize and train them on tier 1 for 2 years before they even get into tier 2, which I think is a smart decision if you have limited resources, because that's where you're going to get the biggest bang for your buck. So instead of a triangle, of course, they got to have a lighthouse because they're from Boston, and they have different programs, obviously, at different tiers. The other things they've adopted is second step curriculum, DBT, James Mazza's stuff, and so forth. They also work closely with Children's Hospital and a number of other organizations that they infuse to help them with their work. And we've been working with them for a long time, and we present with them a lot. And I'm really impressed with it every time that I work with them, the outcomes that they have in an urban, diverse setting. They use effect sizes to evaluate their outcomes. They're influenced by the work of John Hattie. He says about 0.4 as an effect size is typically about 1 year of growth. They looked at the literature and said group counseling averages about 0.58, individual counseling about 0.85. And that would be the percentage of a standard deviation of change that's associated with these interventions. So Boston's model, they look at by area or by composite or by concern area. And from the fall to the spring, Boston saw on average overall effect size of 0.8 in terms of students' cognitive attention. 1.0, a whole standard deviation in terms of improving kids' conduct. And negative affect of 1.2, which over the last 10 years or so, I've been impressed that most MTSS models have the highest effect sizes or highest progress in negative affect, which is interesting because those are the kids that typically we don't serve. Academic functioning about 0.9 and social functioning about 0.9. So those are very high effect sizes, higher than individual therapies that we often do. And so these folks, they've got all kinds of awards and accomplishments, and they've been in Time Magazine and Phi Data Capital and all that stuff. They're also very approachable. So if you have questions, or I brought them out here to Syracuse to train local school districts in how to do this work. Brought them out here a couple times. Very proficient, productive, and intelligent group of folks. I've also done these same kind of evaluations with other districts right around me that aren't Boston. And so one suburban district worked with for a couple years. I did their evaluation for administrative council. And what we do is we look at the mean for an entire school or district, the mean at the fall and the mean in the spring. And we look at the change and we compute that in effect size. So as you can see, this year, this district only had effect sizes of 0.1, 0.1, 0.03. It's not all that impressive, right? But what Boston taught me is that these are clouded by typical kids, because 80% of your kids are typical, they're not going to change much. So if you really want to see the effect sizes, you look at kids in the yellow and red level. And so when I looked at kids who were assessed at some risk, so T-scores 60 to 70 or 69, see the effect sizes start 0.45, 0.92, and so forth. And this is only tier 1 programming. This is SEL on top of PBIS that this district implemented. So these are just a little, yeah. Now, if you look at the kids that were assessed in the red level, so T-scores of 70 or higher, these would be considered clinical range kids. They made the largest amount of progress in response to a tier 1 intervention, effect sizes approaching or over 1.0. Other than cognitive attention, we didn't make them pay attention any better, but we made them more social, more academic, better conduct, and so forth. If we can look at evaluation like this, plus an evaluation of their literacy progress over time, that's a good foundation for supporting kids to overcome developmental hurdles they might not otherwise overcome.